Well, hello and welcome to the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A session. I'm Dave McCormick here from Alpha Software, and I'm pleased to present Dan McCormick, no relation, our lead solutions engineer here at Alpha Software. Today, Dan will be doing, I believe, a short presentation based on some questions that have been sent in. Might be wrong about that. We'll know in a second. But then afterwards, and more importantly, he's here to take your questions. So go ahead and type your questions into the question part of the Alpha Anywhere, of the GoToWebinar control panel. So let's get started. Hello, Dan. Are you there?
Very good. How you doing there today?
Great. So let me go ahead and make you the presenter. And you should see a dialog box there. Great. And I can see your screen.
Dynamite, dynamite. Well, thank you very much, Dave, and glad to be talking to everybody. Sorry I missed you last week. Had a fantastic week out on the road working with one of our outstanding clients, and things went really smooth, exciting. The things they're doing with it is nothing short of amazing. It's going to be transformational for their business, so it's always great to be out there and hands-on and working with such great people. And really want to say thank you to everybody for taking the time to spend with us each week, and our goal is, as always, to try and help you achieve your goals using Alpha Anywhere. And with that in mind, we'd like to remind you to take a few moments here and put your questions into the GoToWebinar control panel question area, and Dave will be monitoring that. We'll try to get to as many, if not all of them, as possible. Along with that, also a reminder that during the week, and in fact we've got some content today that was based on this, you can email guides, that's G-U-I-D-E-S, at alphasoftware.com. And Dave's monitoring that, and we review and use that as information for what to present during these presentations, and also to help people answer specific questions. We actually have another one of those today. So thank you very much. Before I get started, wanted to make sure a couple announcements. First, great starting music, outstanding. You gotta love the boys. Obey the beard. You know what's great.
From your neck of the woods too, I think. Is that right?
The Grange. I drove through there literally on Friday evening. It's about 40 minutes southeast of here. Whole lot of nothing down there, but they produce incredible musicians, so you got to give them from there. That and kolaches. There's some amazing kolaches if you've never had that, but these boys are great. Actually, interesting, just a real quick story. The gentleman on the left, the bass player, he actually was in Washington, and he was attending a White House event, and he was at the event, and about halfway in the evening, he said, "Well, I've got to go," and it's like, wait a minute, you're at the White House event with the president and you have to leave? He goes, yeah, in Austin every year they have a beard festival, and I need to get on a plane because I got to be there tomorrow morning because I go there every year and I love it. So that's the kind of guys these guys are. So they have their priorities straight. They're like, president, yeah, I got to go beer festival from that standpoint there. And I'm sure there was beer at the Beard Festival, so it was kind of all those pieces there. But the other real important is to let you know we have our DevCon next month. I mean, literally tomorrow is September, everybody, which I'm pretty sure you're aware of, but it's amazing how fast it's come. I have little small girls, and they're in school, and actually I had parent-teacher conference, so that's all geared up. So I'm sure everybody has their kids in school, have tons of time now available to develop Alpha solutions, so it's very, very exciting there. But we do have our Alpha DevCon 2006 coming up on September 21st. We are going to do pre-conference training, and we've got that all locked down, ready to go. It's amazing training. When you come out of it, you're going to be a rock and roll star as far as building mobile applications and applying all the new mobile optimized form technology. It's really smooth. We've really worked to make it a real sort of impactful training, and there's still a few seats left. We've actually filled up dramatically in the last week and a half. I was amazed how, I guess, a lot of late bloomers getting on there, but it's pretty amazing. And so we want you to go there. Go to alphasoftware.com, DevCon 2016. Sign up. We have a few slots left for the pre-conference training, and then obviously the training or the conference itself is an amazing event, and you're going to get so much information, and more importantly is you're going to make connections and relationships with people that are going to pay dividends for years to come. And that's been my experience there. So that's the Alpha DevCon 2016. So with that, any comments on that, Dave, or any information on logistics? Or
That's about it. Training is filling up. If you would like a spot, we're down to our last, like, maybe 10 or so spots. We sold quite a few last week. I was very
Yeah. People must have gotten their paychecks or something and said, okay, I'm going to go.
Maybe that's the people wait. I understand.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, with that, with much ado, I want to go ahead and I've got a real quick presentation here. It's more to set the stage on things we're going to talk about in the next couple of weeks. Obviously, the week of DevCon, we won't be doing a Q&A. Actually, I take that back. We are going to do the most personal, most interesting, most focused weekly Q&A ever live at the DevCon. In fact, we'll be doing personal sessions with people, answering their direct questions for their applications. So we're very excited about that. But as far as broadcasting that, out of luck unless you're there. So another reason to attend there. But I want to talk a bit about, and we started talking about this last week, or the week before, about the offline problem. And specifically, you know, one of the key capabilities that Alpha brings to the market and to our people and why people are purchasing Alpha is the ease at which you can develop solutions to work disconnected, i.e. you can install and have an app running locally, collecting, editing, doing all that data, and then we'll automatically synchronize that data to the back-end system. Works really well. And so I talked about there were really two ways you could deploy these. One is through the mobile web browser, and the other is through PhoneGap. And they have different pluses and minuses. You know, basically it's faster and easier to do mobile web browser, but it doesn't have as much capability as actually wrapping a PhoneGap app. And what I'm finding out more and more, and this is just over the last couple of months as I've done more PhoneGap, it's actually becoming so easy to do a PhoneGap app that it almost is becoming like, if you're going to go mobile, you really want to start looking at doing that. Alpha, and Bob Moore in particular, I like to give a shout out to, has done just a phenomenal job of making it so easy to take an app running great on your local machine, wrap it in PhoneGap, install it, and have it off go. There's a few more mechanics to it, but once you understand that, it goes pretty smooth there. But I want to go ahead and sort of follow on that comment, and we're going to have more detailed discussions about this over the next couple of weeks, but wanted to follow up on offline data storage, meaning that since you can't guarantee you to have a connection to the server, you need to have the ability to download, store, and manipulate data on the mobile device with the knowledge that you may or may not have a connection to a back-end server source. And what's interesting is that our primary tool we'll talk about is the list control, and very, very powerful, lots of capabilities. But over the last few releases, Alpha has been expanding your ability to do what's called offline data storage. You know, for a while there, when the first version of the list control came out, it was the be-all, end-all, and we ended up seeing people put a whole bunch of lists on their applications, worked fine, but it was kind of like an overkill solution, meaning that list control does so much, and the reality is often you just need certain capabilities of that. So over the last few releases, Selwyn and the team in development have been saying, you know what, let's start adding different capabilities to manage offline data storage to give people flexibility and make it easier for them and make their apps simpler to manage. And so now, at this point in time, on version 4.3, we're on 4.3, right? Is that, Dave, I'm sorry, I think...
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, that's not a pop quiz question. I mean, not trying to catch you or anything like that. So there's now really 4 distinct methods for having data on a local device and manage that data, and each one has their different capabilities and features. So first and foremost, as I mentioned before, is the list control. The list control is the most powerful. It's incredibly, it's the most rich piece, and it does a lot of capabilities there. But now we've added what's called the client-side data cache. We've also had, for some time now, the ability for you to manage local storage through JavaScript code, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And recently, we also introduced with the ability to actually have SQLite databases that are available on mobile devices by both iOS and Android that then would provide a whole new level of capability for there. Now note, I want to always be very clear, for SQLite databases that will only work if you are using the PhoneGap capability, because it's kind of a component that's built into PhoneGap that is available to it. So SQLite is, the other ones are available through the web browser and through a PhoneGap app, but the SQLite database is only available through the PhoneGap integration at this point in time. Who knows down the road? But that's my guess, is that's going to be for some time. So what I'm going to do is just spend a few minutes walking through each of these different items and talking about a little bit about the nature of them. And then over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to show you some demonstrations on this to kind of flesh out your knowledge even a little bit more, because the reality is when you're doing disconnected mobile apps, the most important aspect is how do you manage that data when I'm not connected? And now we give you essentially a whole toolkit. Instead of one tool, we give you a whole toolkit that's available for you to be able to manage this data. So let's start out with the list control. Most mature one, been around for a long time. It does a number of, think of it as the Swiss Army knife. It does so many different things. One is that it actually does data display. So you can actually display data through a list, and format it and put together nice looking scrollable lists that are swipeable lists, etc. But also beneath the service, it's doing a whole bunch of data management. If, for instance, it's managing updating that information through detail views, and now when you go to the Alpha DevCon, you'll find out through the new form view control. It also handles all of the data synchronization, data downloading, and then data updating and synchronization. So it does a lot of that. And so it really is a very rich control. And it works great. I mean, it continues to mature, become more powerful, easier to use, faster, and really a great tool there. And that was always your first and foremost go-to tool in order to do remote data management. But now we've added some new capabilities. And the next one I'm going to talk about is client-side cache. And that was actually introduced for a very specific reason. As I mentioned before, and I'm popping back and forth, so bear with me, the list control, when it first came out, let's say you had a primary list and then you had a secondary list of like locations, and so each record in the primary list would have a location. And in order to show a list of locations, you actually had to generate a second list control to hold that information. Now, that second information was really read-only lookup kind of data. As sort of, I just want to be able to show it to the user on the other list control as maybe a drop-down menu or something along those lines. Well, the good news is that that's doable. The bad news is that it was kind of overkill, because that second list control, all it was really doing was downloading a set of data and then allowing that data to be accessed by the primary list control. So a bit of an overkill. You didn't need all the other features of the list control to do that. So Alpha introduced something called the client-side data cache, and actually that should be data cache. And the idea behind this is that the data cache allows you to point to a back-end data source, download that information into what's called a client-side data cache, and then that information is then available to your list control to be able to use. So it doesn't have all the synchronization. The only synchronization it does have is download, where it'll bring down the information. But it doesn't have the synchronization where you edit it and upload it, because it's unnecessary. It's not needed for that. So the beauty of this is that it's built into it, so adding a client-side data cache costs essentially nothing to add to your form control, whereas adding a whole nother list is a whole bunch of stuff that needed to be downloaded and managed by the local system. So it's faster, it's easier, and it makes more sense. It's just, hey, I need a read-only list available, and you can have many of them that is available for me to use on my mobile app. And the cool thing is the data cache is, once it's pulled it down, you don't need a network connection to be able to access that data. It all operates locally on your local machine. So think of it as like a stripped down list control without even the user interface piece, but all it does is pull data down, have it available, and do that. And again, and I'm going to go through these fairly quickly, but we'll go through each one of these in more detail on future presentations. So think of it as, we found the list control, worked great. People were putting like 5, 6 list controls on their UX to show to the user. Reality is they only had one that was important. The other ones were just lookup lists. So now with the client-side data cache, you can create those other lookup lists and only have that single list control. Easier to manage your application, less issues, less size, faster operation, all those cool things from there. Very, very powerful, very cool. And you'll learn in our DevCon training, the client-side data cache is critical in the form view control to allow you to have dynamic lists. Like when you're editing a field, it can dynamically set what the person is going to see. It's really cool. It makes life so much easier, and it really powerful. It takes complex apps and make them much, much simpler. Now, there's always been another technique called local storage. And what local storage is think of it as like on your local device, a scratch pad. And you can read and write data to that through JavaScript code. And this can be either through the mobile web browser or the PhoneGap implementation. And by the way, back here, client-side data caches work both on PhoneGap and also on mobile apps, so it works in both cases. This was really a programming technique, and there's a few JavaScript items that allow you to write to local storage. It's fully managed with code, so you got to have to write a little JavaScript, and it really doesn't have any syncing. That's up to you. Basically, you're reading and writing that data to it. So I like to term it more as like a scratch pad, but as a permanent, semi-permanent scratch pad. So in the case of a web browser, you can bring down some data and kind of store it there locally. You're limited by the amount of information. I think it's about 5 megs on the browsers that are available for local storage. But the benefit of local storage, if you have some certain things, you can speed up your apps pretty significantly. In the PhoneGap world, which is really powerful, is that you can essentially use local storage to write, say, parameters or configuration parameters, like who's the user who's using this, their department, and other things like that. So you never have to go back to the server to get that information. You can just have it locally on that system. The other benefit of local storage on the PhoneGap is you're only limited by the file system to a large degree. So you have a much larger size. You can store data in there. And then last but not least is, if I'm not mistaken, the local storage stuff within a PhoneGap app is encrypted. So you do get a certain level of security that's available. We highly recommend, if you're really concerned about security, you can actually use your mobile app to encrypt the data, save it into local storage. Then when you read it back out of local storage, you can decrypt that data and have it available. And that really gives you the best kind of safety and security as far as managing data in case someone steals a phone and wants to try and get that data off it kind of scenario. So that's local storage. Again, coding, very handy for certain specific keys. More likely you'll be using the client-side data cache and the lists, but those pieces there. Now, with the latest release of Alpha, Alpha added an even more powerful method to store data locally offline, and that's called the SQLite database capabilities. So again, as we mentioned before, it requires PhoneGap because PhoneGap actually includes in their wrapper, if you enable it, the SQLite engine. So it's actually included in the wrapper. And so we connect to that SQLite engine, and now we're able to have essentially SQLite databases on mobile devices. And this is really cool because there's a couple things that are really neat about this. One is that it can hold an enormous amount of data. It is a very mature technology. SQLite has been around for years, and it's you can manipulate it and integrate and use it using standard SQL statements. So for certain situations, it can actually be easier to write a little SQL script to do this than other methods that are currently done with, say, a list control. So it kind of gets back to a more natural interface there. Now, the important thing to know about SQL database is it's read and write, meaning that you can not only read data from the local database, but write it. It does not have built-in synchronization, and in fact, the list control really doesn't connect to it directly. So it's not really meant to be a data synchronization to take over for that job from the list control. If you need to do any kind of synchronization work, it'll be up to you to write the code to then write the data back up to the server. Now, we already have a bunch of features that will do the following. First and foremost is that you can, using Action JavaScript with no coding, you can basically say, hey, do me a favor, go up to the server, query this database information, create a SQLite database, and download it to my local PhoneGap app and make it available to me. Or you can say, go up to the server and bring down an existing database that's already been created and make it available to me. And so these are kind of built-in functionality within it. And then once that data is local, you can then use SQLite or some JavaScript, Action JavaScript, to query that data. So what we really envision at this point in time is the SQLite database is really like a very large read-only database that's available. So here's an example of where you may use that. Let's say you have a product catalog. This product catalog changes once a month or once a quarter or something like that. But there's tons of data in there. It could be a very large enterprise. So you're not going to want to do like a client-side data cache or or local storage kind of techniques. So what you can do is create that database either ahead of time or on the fly and include that in your app, and therefore all of that data is available to your app without ever touching the server. And in fact, what's kind of cool is that if you are building an app with PhoneGap, you can say include this SQLite database from the very beginning, and so when it builds the PhoneGap application, it includes the SQLite database. So when it launches on the local machine, you don't even have to go back to the server to get any data. You could have like a standalone, disconnected product catalog reader on your phone, and you never have to touch the server. But the power is you can also update that SQLite database on the fly using Action JavaScript. So it really opens up a whole new kind of really easy way to do some really powerful things with a lot of data, and also more importantly, give you the power to not only have that data in your app, but have it without ever having to touch a server, or if you want to be able to dynamically update it on a periodic basis. So quarterly you could download a new database for the person on the local links. And again, you can read and write this data, so you can write actual information in the database. And I've heard some ideas of maybe it's a form of a log file, is you could write a whole bunch of data to a SQL database, so if you ever needed it, it would be available. There's some neat things you can do with it, but it's primarily meant to be a read-only, lots of data source for a disconnected mobile app. Down the road, I'm sure there will be a lot of neat new things we'll be able to do with it, but for now, kind of put your thinking in there. And so I'm going to cut it off here. We're going to go through these items here, and this is a quick summary before I end. We're going to go through this. Oh, actually, let's get rid of this. That's for my own. Moving too quick there. So, we have list control, client-side data cache, local storage, and SQLite database. Does it do two-link sync? Only the list control does that at this time, and it does it all for you. If you want any other method to do that, there's really no way to do it on the client-side data cache. This would be local storage, I'm going to say in here, manual, to make this even more impactful in manual. As you see, I'm developing it on the fly. As far as reading and writing, the list control, absolutely, you can read and write the data. Client-side data cache, nope. Basically, in this case, it's a read-only source. Local source, you can read and write it using code. And the SQLite database is also read and write, so you can actually insert data in that database. But very important is I want to set your expectations that since there's no sync, it's really just meant as more of a read-only environment, at least at this point in time. But you can do anything you want with Alpha, so I'm not going to limit what you want to do from that standpoint there. So that's a quick summary of the capabilities of these different offline. In the next week or two, I'm going to give you little quick samples of each to kind of show, to give you, this has all been text and PowerPoint. I don't want to bore you to death, but we're going to move and I'll actually show you some quick demonstrations of these in the next couple of weeks before our fabulous DevCon 2016, in which I can go through and show you it in operation, give you some examples, and hopefully that will flesh out your understanding of that. So with that, Dave, I'm going to take a quick there. We do have a question that came in on the line that I'd like to cover, but I want to take a little process break here for you and just encourage anybody to be adding questions, either about this content or something else.
That's great. So far, audio videos coming through smoothly. I know often you do a process check, so I just want to let you know.
Excellent, thank you.
A bunch of questions that have come in.
Excellent.
So when you're ready to field
them. Yeah, let's go ahead and field the ones about this topic.
Yep.
And I definitely have the individual who sent in that one question we can talk about. It's about the advanced dialog box. I want to show that demonstration, show you how you can do that.
Great. Well, one of the first ones we have related to this topic is just someone who's asking about the client-side data cache, and just that they'd like to see an example. So.
Oh, okay. I'm going to actually do that next week. I hate to say next week, but I'm going to actually walk you through it. But I really want to frame it and go through the process versus ad hoc. So great question. That's first in the queue, and we'll be going through that next week on the weekly webinar.
Okay. You said that
there are, by the way, if you get, I'm sorry, Dave, but if they get anxious, if you go to alphasoftware.com/videos, is that the correct link?
That'll take you there, sure.
Yeah, there are some pre-made videos that have been done about that, so I don't mean to, deny you that. So there's some videos there, and then I'm going to go through and do a little bit more of a demo next week.
Great.
Thank you.
So another couple of questions. There are also some great how-to articles in the client-side data cache, and we can get the link for you. Our documentation master is here on the line, and she's looking that up, so I'll send it over to you guys. Here's just a question, not directly related to the client-side data cache, but one that you might be able to field here, which is that when you're building a mobile apps, if you're planning on using PhoneGap, is that true that you should not use embedded components?
And the answer is no. There's no limitation on that. Specifically, if I go ahead and go into alpha, and bear with me, everybody. And so let me go in here as it wakes up. Come on, wake up. There we go. I was doing some reporting stuff. Remember, we have an amazing reporting tool built into alpha. Man, we should do a session on that as a refresher on all the cool stuff, including the SVG stuff. So, normally when we build a UX control, we obviously pick data controls and put them on there. But the alpha solution has the ability to do what are called embedded controls. And where is it? Oh, embedded objects. And you find those, by the way, in the other controls. So this is our UX component. For people who are new to alpha, this is our form designer. Well, much more than a form designer, but it's really where you lay out your forms, you put in your different controls like text boxes, maps, QR codes, etc. But down here in other controls, we have something called embedded object, where what I can do is I can click on that, and then it will give me a list of other components that I created, reports, whole bunch of things, and I can pick one of these things, and now I could have so I can break my application down into subcomponents with each embeddable object there. Now, the important thing to realize when you do it this way is that when you embed an object into an existing UX, when it goes to the server, or when the UX is opened by the client, either the mobile web browser, there is a method for which it loads that embedded object into it. So you have essentially think of it as a parent within these child objects. And the default method is called AJAX callback. So what will happen is when I say, hey, I want to show this UX, this form, what it'll do is it'll first load up the UX at the top level. Then it will say, oh, guess what? There's an embedded form or an embedded object in here. I'm going to call back to the server right now. And then I'm going to bring back that information and then build that embedded object as what's called an AJAX callback. So it's a two-step process. Bring down the parent, then any object that's embedded in there, make another call to the server, and then bring down that other component and build it up from there. Now the downside of that is that if you are building a disconnected app, you can't guarantee you're going to have a connection to the back-end server. So when you open up this UX, it will open up the first one, but then when you say, oh, okay, ready, let's download the next one and bring it in through an AJAX callback, it will fail and your app won't work. So that was actually, that was originally how it worked, the only way it worked. But then we ran into a couple clients that were building much more complex apps, and they were breaking those apps down into multiple subcomponents to make it easier. They had multiple people working on the team. So Alpha added the ability now to do what's called pre-computed. So, and this only applies to a PhoneGap and what's called a static HTML application, but mainly PhoneGap. So what will happen here is that when you go to build your PhoneGap app, it will take that top-level UX, it will identify any child embedded components, and it will render them right there during the build process. And so therefore, what goes into your PhoneGap is a completely realized UX control with all the parent and all the child objects instantiated at once. So therefore, when it runs on the mobile device inside PhoneGap, it loads it all up and it doesn't make any calls back to the server. So the answer is absolutely you can use this method with PhoneGap because you can use this new method. And what you need to do is you click on the object you've embedded, and then over in the properties find the property road for method for opening UX in PhoneGap or static HTML, and what you have is pre-computed. There's actually a AJAX if offline. Let me make sure. Did I lose you or it just pinged at me? Make sure I haven't. Okay, good. I'm sorry. The GoToMeeting binged at me, so I thought I might have lost you. So that's what you want to do there. And that's just make sure if you're going PhoneGap, you have embedded objects, use the pre-computed, and then that way it will be available from that standpoint there. Now, the only other thing, and this is actually a question that came in that we'll be addressing at the DevCon, is, how do you talk among the different objects? And there's some techniques we'll be talking about that. Since usually you have, traditionally in a UX, you have all of your controls on, essentially on the parent, but if you have some controls on a subcomponent, like a embedded object, how do you kind of communicate between the two? And we'll be talking a little bit more about that at the DevCon. But back to your original question, absolutely, originally that was a problem, but not anymore. You just got to make sure you pre-compute the embedded objects so that when it gets built by PhoneGap, it includes everything at one shot and doesn't require a call back to the server. Great question.
That is great. Thank you very much, Dan. Here's a question on XBasic, and the question is, how do you handle errors in XBasic? In other words, in an application with a set of sort of interrelated XBasic functions, do you know how to do error handling, or how do you usually approach that?
Great question. And there's a specifically Alpha XBasic has a very, very powerful way to handle error handling. So I think the best way to do that is to go ahead and do a quick example here. And let's, I'm trying to think, I would like to kind of show it in operation, so that'll make it a little bit more interesting. So let me go ahead and put a button on here. Bear with me as I kind of get this set up and struggle. That's always why it's better to, so, okay, let's see, generate error, okay? And what I'm doing here is this is a UX control. What I'm going to use is what's called an XBasic callback. And and I won't go to that, but I just, so that I'll call some, think of it as calling some stuff on them there. So generate error function. Okay. And so I won't detail out this, but I'll put that in there. Okay. So now what I have right now is a button here called generate error. And what that does is it calls a script on the server. So it calls, and then everything that happens in here is a function here. And so what's going to happen is once it runs this, it's going to run XBasic in here and then return a result to the screen there. And so what I usually use, is something called the onError. And I'm using my handy-dandy code library where I've already got my error handling. And I'm going to call this sample error. Okay. Okay. So let me go ahead and walk you through out of this. In any of your XBasic scripts, you can put a command that says on error go to and then a tag. In this case, it's called error handler sample error. Then you can put any XBasic code in here, and if an error occurs, instead of just dying, it will go to this spot in your script. So it's a classic old school visual, basic go-to, saying if you run into an error for any situation, then instead of just dying, then I want you to jump to this location here and then start running from there. So it won't just stop the processing there. Now what you can do here is a couple things. First is you can identify what is the error. And the way you do that is through this little script here that says ERR is equal to error code get. So with ERR, that will be the error code. And Alpha has a whole bunch of predefined error codes like, syntactical problems, database connection. I mean, there's many, many different errors that are available. Then what you can do is you can use this next little here saying error text get error. And what it's going to do is you feed it that code and out will come the human readable message there. And then in this case what I'm doing, and I would actually do it this way, is I would then send back to the user my error message. And so whatever error that occurred in here, instead of just doing nothing, they would get a pop-up message that would tell them the error, which is really good in development. Now in your case, what you may want to do is, based on the error code, you may want to take further steps. So you can actually put in here error correcting items. So let's say you're doing a process and it throws an error. Well, down here you could maybe reset things. You could give them a nicer message on the user interface. You could write to a log file. You could do any kind of thing you want to do. But all you need to do is any of your XBasic scripts, just put in on error go to, then the name of where, think of it as a location, And then down here you'll notice here's the name of that followed by the colon. So what happens is if an error occurs, it's going to jump right here and start generating or start executing this code. Now you'll notice one other thing here. I have this end statement. So I can have, statement 1, statement 2, statement 3, and I could spell, it'd be great there. So I go through and I'm running these statements. If it fails on like statement number 2, it's going to jump down here. But let's say I don't have any errors. I go through all these statements. They all pass correctly. Well, I don't want to go ahead and run this because it's, it would just go ahead and keep running the code below it. So I put an end here that will end the function and the running of this script so it doesn't actually continue running and doing these lines here. So you have your on arrow go to, you have your statements you're going to run, you have the end statement right here that will stop normal execution, and then you have your error handling down here where you can not only show the user a message, you can actually take actions and do things along those lines. So this is how you handle errors in XBasic. And one other thing is that let's say you do have an error and you want to find out what's going on. Remember, there's a great statement called debug1. And what this does, by just typing debug1 in your script and running it, what will happen is this will open up the debugger and allow you to step through and use traditional debugging techniques to look at each statement, to figure out what the variables are and things along those lines. So that's how you do error handling inside XBasic. It's very flexible, very easy. And again, you can, this is, there's some, if you look up in our documentation on error, you'll be able to find some more samples and some examples along those lines. But that's how you handle that.
That is awesome. Okay, just another question. You were talking earlier about local storage, and you had mentioned that there's about a 5 megabyte limit for disconnected applications. So someone here has actually 2 questions about that limit. The first is, does that limit apply to the list control?
That's a great question.
So I think actually it's the answer is yeah. I mean it does. I mean the list control has the ability to work with either local storage or with the file system.
Right. But file system only when you wrap with PhoneCap.
Only when you wrap with PhoneCap. Now in this particular case, they would prefer not to wrap with PhoneCap because they would like to create an application that works the same on mobile as it does on the phone, and they don't want to take the extra steps. So in other words, they just want it to be a web application.
Yes.
So they're wondering if there might be plans to increase that limit, and I think I can address that one too.
Yes, go ahead.
Which is that, no, we can't really increase that because that 5 megabyte limit is actually imposed by the web browser on the device. It's not something that we've imposed on it. So really, if you're trying to go above 5 megs disconnected, you're really going to need to use PhoneCap for that. There's just no real way around that, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's too bad. And these, I do know that the browsers are getting more and more powerful, and who knows, that may be lifted down the road. But at this time, there's no known plans to increase it, and primarily because they don't want a random website to put a gig of data on your mobile device, and all of a sudden you don't have the memory to handle it anymore. So there's somewhat of a courtesy/security issue in terms of what is able to be done through a web browser, and that's kind of, I think, where they come from. I think maybe down the road they may say, oh, maybe there's a permission scheme to enable more local storage, but again, I haven't heard any specific plans around that at this time.
Great.
Great question.
Someone's pointed out that not everyone can make it to DevCon, and that is sad. But
no!
Will this class ever be offered again?
Oh my God! Excuses. Yeah. Yes, there are plans to offer it, and we'll be working on those to be able to offer that as an ongoing support, because it's something that we want to have available for people to be able to learn about how to do the mobile optimized stuff. So. Right. I kind of spoke for you, Dave, but...
Yep, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, sorry.
So, meanwhile, while we've been speaking, Sarah Mitchell, our documentation person, has gone through and put down a whole bunch of links, which you can find here in the chat window, that deal with data and local storage, including general documentation for that, how to store data in local storage using a client-side data cache, how to populate a drop-down box using the client-side data cache. So that's all. For those of you who have a chat window, I know GoToWebinar is not consistent. So some people have that chat panel here, and if you do, there are the links. Some people don't. If you want these links, including the last one here, which has to do with XBasic error handling, if you want those links and you don't see them there, just go ahead and send an email to guides, G-U-I-D-E-S, at alphasoftware.com. I'd be happy to send them off to you. Let me see.
Thank you, Sarah. Sarah's doing an amazing job of really maturing the doc side. It's just getting so much better.
Yeah. And she'd also like to point out just that if you do a search for just simply client-side data cache, you'll find a whole bunch of good, reasonable results. I don't know if you want to pop over to the documentation system just for a second. It's such an improvement.
Oh, sure, yeah.
What we had before. Let's just go do that.
First, let's say hello to our buddies. There you go. There you go. Just got to take a moment.
Yeah.
You're seeing real talent right there on the screen. Okay. So alphasoftware.com/documentation.
Yeah. So client-side data cache. Just go ahead and type that up.
Okay. Then you go client-side data cache. And we will be talking more detail next week.
And there you are.
And then these are the different pieces here.
Now, once you've clicked on one, I would like to point something out. That sometimes our documentation isn't as clear. Or for this, look at this. It says here it's missing. So there you go. I want to point that out. The reported issue of this page. You click that, and it will send off a email to our documentation team, including the page that the problem is.
What's up with this?
You can say stuff. What's up with this?
Yeah, but be more descriptive, please. Don't be a smart ass.
Yeah, this is a monitored email address. We look at it several times a day. There's a team of people monitoring it, and we do fix these things and we get back to you. So by all means, this is an interactive, living, breathing project, and you guys can make it better by reporting any issues.
Yeah, this is UX Control Menu Additional Options. So this is a better one. That's just a menu. Mm-hmm. And so this shows you a much better.
Superb. Let me go through the other questions here.
Sarah got a demerit.
First,
Sarah, I'm going to have to say you ruined my whole Q&A. I'm going to hold you responsible for this is a blown day. We might as well just shut down right now, Dave. I'm so frustrated.
If you'd like to express your disappointment in person, feel free to attend our DevCon at 26.
Exactly. We'll introduce you personally to Sarah.
Yeah, exactly. Here's a question about a technology I haven't heard about in a long time, but this person is interested in using ActiveX. And was wondering if you can synchronize a contact list so it can be displayed in ActiveX.
And the answer is I would have to do a little research on that, which I can do. I just haven't used ActiveX in a long time, a desktop type functions.
Came out in 1996, 20 years old, but people must still be using it. Anyway, if you've got a question about that, please send it into guides, G-U-I-D-E-S, at alphasoftware.com, and we can find someone who still knows about ActiveX and how it works with Alpha Anywhere. And I do believe it, in fact, does work with Alpha Anywhere. There have been interfaces written for it way back when. So here's a question. How do you properly reference in JavaScript a two-value slider, like there's value 1 and value 2, in order to programmatically set the slider values?
Oh, man, that's another good one. Let's see, slider. Do we have a slider in here? Where is that? Spin list. I know when you create a, you can create a slider with that. Man, we're getting some good questions. A little tougher there. I can't just pop off. Yeah, I'm not seeing the actual slider. I know when you create so I'm going to have to do, again, a little research on that one just because I haven't used the slider in a long, there's the slider right there. Okay, so let's go slider. So you can have a slider here and where do we set minimum value? So let's go ahead and do a working preview. Okay, so you can go there, and this will, when you do that, it sets the value of that control. But what they're asking about is that, if you'll notice, we have a minimum and a maximum value that's set right here. And it's, let's say it's 2 value. So now, and I'm not sure if it displays it on there, but, down here it's 0, that's 100 at this end. Oh, I see. So they want to do something like this, where they set this value there. So let's go ahead and create a button here. Excuse me. I do want to make sure if I can't solve it within the next couple of minutes, I want to
I love when you do
that
these. Sometimes they even work. You know, it's great.
No, don't count on it. Well, there's no action JavaScript that I'm aware of, but I always go in there and I type like slider. And you never know. You know, you'd be amazed that stuff gets added there all the time.
Sure.
So I'm going to have to go into text mode, and now I'm in JavaScript. And so what I would do is I would insert a component method. So let me walk through that a little bit slower. I'm on my button here. I double-click on it. Normally you would click Add New Action JavaScript, and then you have a whole bunch of pre-made things to do what we, for instance, open a label, open a grid component, do a map, things along those lines. But if that's not available, we can go here and click on text mode, and now we're in the JavaScript text editor. And most importantly is down below, we have insert UX component method. So I can click on there, and then I can type list. What's it? It's a slider. Okay. Get a pointer to such a slider so you can call methods on that object or set properties of that object. So here's kind of how so I've got a way to talk to that. So I'm going to copy this example of the clipboard, and then I'm going to insert that in there. So I'm going to copy and paste that there. Okay, so slider. So now I have a pointer to that slider. I wonder, the question becomes, what is, if I look at the slider, let me go ahead and save this and go to my slider real quick. There is a property called minimum value and maximum value. So I'd want to set that value. So the way I'd have to do that is in here, once I have a pointer to the control. So what this is doing is say, give me a pointer. Then I would do something like my object.minimum is equal to 10, and then my object.maximum is equal to 90. Now here's the problem. I don't know if these are truly the objects there, so I'm totally guessing that.
You can't just make those up and have them.
Yeah, I know. I wish you could just like, hey, you figure it out.
We can, please send us off an email and we'll get you with the right syntaxes.
Yeah, exactly. So, but the general, that's a good point, is that everything on all these controls are referenceable when you do the dialogObject.get control. And then once you have that object, then you can set the parameters of that using text or using JavaScript. And the trick is at that point you need to know for a slider what are the values that need to be set. And they may not be exposed. We may not have those exposed for someone to be able to look at. So I would have to find out there. But that's generally the technique. We'll go ahead and find out what the how we would actually set the minimum and maximum for a slider. And it could be something a little bit more ornate than this, but this is the general process for how to do it. But I want to show, always look in the insert UX component, type whatever you're working on here, like slider, and if it's in the documentation or in the example code, you'll be able to see it, and you can sometimes just copy the code out and then adjust it and have it working from there. So we'll have to find out how to do that. That's a good one.
Cool.
Okay, so I want to go ahead, before the next, I want to go ahead and show there was a question from an individual so I want to cover that right now so we don't run out of time.
Yep.
And the question was this, is that, let me go ahead and just demonstrate what they're doing. So I'm going to add a new button, and I'm going to say, show advanced message box. Okay, so what they want to do is there's something called an advanced message box that's built into Alpha, so when you click on it, then it actually allows you to pop up a message. So the way we do that is we double click on the button, we click add new action and type message, and then we have a message box here. So I can click on that, and you'll notice here I have a message box from that standpoint there, and I can pick like sample message, okay, but you'll notice there's a selection. So I'm going to first show this. You can put up a message, have OK or OK cancel. So I'm just going to go ahead and say that, and I'll do this. Now when I run it, I click a button, it just shows an alert, puts in the message in there and gives me either OK or OK cancel. So that's a basic message. But Alpha actually has the ability to do something a little more fancy. You can use what's called an advanced message box. And when you select that, you now have a whole bunch of very powerful information here. You have the message box title, the message box text, the type, etc. So you can actually do a more advanced, and then you can also do things, for instance, instead of having a OK button, we could have a yes, no, and cancel button. And then you can say, okay, if the person hits yes, run this JavaScript, cancel, run this JavaScript. The cool thing is once I click on that and then I run it, it does it from there. And you'll notice now we have a more interesting message box with cancel, yes, and no. And again, I can set JavaScript to run when I click any one of these here. So the question that came in was that, okay, if I go ahead and edit this advanced message box, you'll notice that my box title is called my title. And that's what is kind of fixed in there. And I could go in here and edit that and make it all fancy. But the question is they want to be able to modify this message box title when it runs based on other information in it. As you can see, I can't really point this at a field or something like that. It seems to be fixed. So I'm somewhere there. So the best way to handle that now is that now that we've set our message box, you can click this here and turn that from Action JavaScript into a JavaScript. And you'll notice that it's going to say it's going to be converted into text mode. You will no longer be able to continue editing it in the Action JavaScript. So it's a one-way conversion. And it says, do you really want to do this? Say yes. Voila. So now you'll see that instead of there, this is the actual JavaScript that is being run. So you'll notice here, A5 message box show my title and then the rest of the information. So you know, it's sometimes hard to read that in this, but you can see it's there. Now, so if I want to change this my title dynamically, I can do the following. So let's go ahead and click Save. I'm going to add a text, let's say a text box here, and I'll go title, okay, and I'm going to go put that there, and I'm going to default that title to be Hello World. Okay, so this is a field on my form, and when I show this advanced message box, what I want to do is what's in this field, I want it to be showing for my title there. So I'm going to go ahead and go back in here, open up my button. You'll notice now I have Action JavaScript, so I can do the following. I can get the value of what's in title. So the way I do that, I do insert UX component method. I search for get value. And you'll notice there is a command called get value UX control name. In fact, they have some sample, which I like to do. So I'm going to copy this example, and then I'm going to close, and then I'm going to go right here, and I'm going to paste it. And so you'll note here, the first one looks great. So what I want to do is I want to get the value of the title text box. So I'm going to go ahead and go here. One of the nice things is I can click right, it will automatically show me here a list of my fields, so I can get title. Now that I have the value of title in there, in here, I can just go down here, and instead of my title, I can call it title. So it'll take, this is going to grab the value of this text box at runtime, put it into a JavaScript variable called title, and then instead of showing my title, I'm going to show that here by just editing this script here. So I can click Save, do a working preview, and hopefully you'll notice the title is called Hello World instead of my title. In fact, I can say Hello Class, hit Show Advanced Message Box, Hello Class. And you can change this custom message here. You can do anything because basically in this JavaScript that has been generated, you could replace my custom message right here with maybe the contents of another field, or build this up from that and show it there. So the general process was use Action JavaScript to build the basic capability. Then click on text mode to convert it into text or into JavaScript. And from there you can kind of look at it and say, okay, I can now grab, use some other JavaScript to grab the value of something on the UX control, and then update the actual This is the command that actually shows the message box and goes from there. So that's kind of, hopefully that answers the individual who called us in. We really appreciate that kind of question. We'll go and find out about that title or the slider, setting that using JavaScript. Well, I'm sure there was a hidden little parameter I need to know, but I hope that answers your question. And so now you can create and make your show advanced messages completely dynamic using a couple more lines of JavaScript.
Excellent. Someone just wrote in and pointed out, interestingly, that when it comes to handling XBasic errors, there's actually a client-side event that was just added a few weeks ago. That was
what?
I know.
Is Selwyn on the? I bet Selwyn's watching. Yeah. His name is Winsell has asked a question.
So a few weeks ago, a new client-side event called on-server-side event handler error was added.
It doesn't like that.
Occurs. That might be here in your. Also, at the beginning of the session, you had asked if we were on version 4.3, and actually, the official release is still version 4.2. But you might.
Oh, I'm so excited about 4.3. I'm thinking.
All right, then. All right, excellent. Yeah.
So it's called, and actually, let's go ahead and look at that.
Yeah.
Let's go here, and what's that called again?
It is called on. Let me just grab it for you. On server side event handler error.
All right, man. It's a little stark.
It's time to report an issue with this page, huh?
Yeah. I'm not gonna. I'll leave that to Sarah. Sarah, you can report yourself on there.
I do suspect, though, it's written up in release notes. So if you need.
Interesting. Okay. So what you can do is, if you don't handle it yourself on the XBasic code, which is how I've been doing it now, I guess there's now when you call it, you can. I wonder if that's in the XBasic callback. Let's see. Let's go here. Generate error. Okay. I have Ajax failed JavaScript. Offline JavaScript. This is really cool. Yeah, so I'll have to check that out. That's really cool. So basically what it will do is it will, you don't have to put your what to do if it fails on the server side. You can just say, make sure, do this call, and then if there is an error, what to do on the client side. Interesting. So, which would simplify your XBasic code a little bit and give you probably a better reaction on the front end to an error that may occur. Okay, we'll look into that. I'm very curious to see how that works.
So I have a couple of questions related to the HTML editor that you get for a text area in a component.
Okay.
And so one is, if I insert a link, can I have the link say something different than just the URL?
Okay, so what the individual is asking is we have a control in here called text area. So this allows you to show, a larger area to text instead of just like a single line like this. Mm-hmm. Now, what you can do with a text area is that you can use what's called the HTML editor, and you can enable that, and that will now, when you run the solution, it shows an error there. So let me go ahead and let's go ahead and change the width of this to be, let's say, 500 pixels, and then the height will make it like 300 pixels. Make it look a little, so it'll look more. So now when I run this, I've got a full JavaScript here, so I can go, hello world, here is a test. I can go here and say I want that to be blue. I want this to be cross through. So it's an HTML editor. But what they're asking is that if we insert a link, go Alpha Software, and I highlight this, and then up here I have a link, insert link, and I can go www.alphasoftware.com. So all I can really do is put, and so now when I can, this is, if you look at the actual code, it's put in a reference to that. Notice it's an anchor that allows you to then link out. It's a full link from that. By the way, what I did is I clicked right here that shows code. So that said, it looks like right now, if you're in a text area, I mean, I'm typing in the code. And run the question by me again. I'm sorry.
So can you have the link be different than the name of the link? Like, could you have it say Alpha Software website, but when you click on
yeah.
it, okay.
Alpha Software website. Then I just highlight all that, hit the link button, and then I go www.alphasoftware.com. And now that whole... Oh, interesting.
Oh, there's your question right there.
Okay, so do the default one here. But let me show you a trick. Okay. Let me go in here, and I'm going to say Alpha Software.
Oops, I think you're right at the wrong place. Oh, it looks like there are two hrefs in there now.
Yeah, I might have done... Oh, you know what? Because I edited them there. So let's do this. Let's go back here. Let's delete this. Okay. Now if I go back in here. Good. Now I'm going to go back into here, and I'm going to go Alpha Soft. I'm going to insert a link, and I'm going to call it Alpha Software. But that's interesting. That's an interesting behavior. So it says Alpha Software, but now if I go in here, I need to actually put in to the href www.alphasoftware.com. Now when I go back in here, it should still say Alpha Software, but it's a true link. But that's an interesting behavior that it actually
changes it. Yeah.
Well, what you would want to see is that you would normally, when you see insert link kind of scenario, you insert a link, and up here it would say link name, the link URL, and then the text, and it inserts both of them. So I guess that's just a limitation of the built-in HTML editor.
I think that we should probably report that. That sounds like something that could be improved.
Yeah. But I want to...
But there are some other editors as well. I don't know if...
CK Editor. I mean, if you're going to look at it, you should look at CK Editor, which, if you want a really nice experience for your people, you can use CK Editor. And it's modern, Web 2.0, and you can integrate it. And actually, you can contact Steve Wood. I think has an off-the-shelf integration with it. Steve Wood. So, but very interesting. We will kind of talk about it. But it looks like what's going on. Oops, sorry. Is that for whatever the original one? I think this might even be Microsoft's built-in editor or something like that. It allows you to put a link, but you really can't. It's not. You can go in and edit it using this. Yeah, that's kind of a pain in the tail, but it is easy. I mean, it's not hard. You just basically type in the text and then go in here and take this information right here and type in the URL. It's going to leave the text alone, and so it should show fine. But for your user, that may be confusing. So either we'll look into it, but also maybe look at integrating CK Editor as a better editor to use in the system.
Wow, it looks like we've run over time, you guys.
Oh my gosh! 2
bonus minutes today. It's 2:03. Yeah. But anyway, thanks everyone for attending today. Thanks for all the questions you sent in, and thank you, Dean, of course, for presenting.
Yes.
If you have any questions for the upcoming week, please send them to guides, Guides, at alphasoftware.com. Also, you'll find a copy of today's recording and previous recordings at videos.alphasoftware.com. So thanks for attending, and we hope to see you next Wednesday. Take care, and goodbye.